My name is Steve Sheets. I'm a longtime software developer in all areas, desktop, mobile, Apple Watch, done Apple TV, done desktop for Windows environment in some server, not as much as but a lot of protocol. And in recent years, I've been doing a lot of VR work on my own, because there's not a lot of VR jobs out there. We run the VR DC user group, which meets in DC, and we used before COVID in Virginia. We're not sure if that's going to start up or not. If anyone's interested, there's a lot of YouTube videos of the past talks here. Go look for MAGFest VR. You'll find some of our previous talks. I got this group of experts together because we want to talk about the latest buzzword in the tech industry, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Mostly because artificial intelligence and machine learning up until recently really didn't work. I mean, it was fooling around. It was parsing text. It was not what we were hoping it to be. And suddenly, mostly due to the power of GPU and computing and the fact that we have the internet, because you can't teach an app to identify a cat unless you have 5 million cat pictures. So now we have data to actually teach these models. And then that combined with VR and AR, by the way, when I say VR, that means augmented reality, X reality, S reality, M reality. Did I leave any alphabets out? Yeah.
That's most of them.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about that today and what interests us. Now, I want to tell you one thing. Of all the sessions I had the hardest time coming up with questions for this because AI or ML means different things to different people. It is a wildly diverse area that has underlyings that are together, but the reasons to use them and the issues and the ethical problems, because boy, do we have a lot of ethical problems with machine learning right now, are different. So we're going to be jumping around a bit. I would like people to start here and go across and introduce themselves and their area of expertise in AI and ML.
Hey, I'm Alan Davies. I'm a software engineer, about 25 years. Starting with the games industry, mainly worked at Electronic Arts, and been dabbling with AI, and AI is used a lot for playing games, and lately working on AI mesh generation, and that's about it for me.
Hi, I'm Sam Martino. I'm the CEO and founder of a small game studio just outside of DC called Dogwood Gaming. In 2021, we won a grant from the state of Maryland for AI development, which was really convenient because it was 6 months before ChatGPT came out. So we were really lucky in getting to time that properly. But we have a really big interest in history and building historical experiences. So that's kind of the angle that I'm looking at it from.
Hi, my name is Jordan Higgins. I'm a human-centered engineer lead at MITRE. I think I have two sort of primary areas of research right now where I'm looking at AI and virtual environments. First, I'm very interested in the use of generative AI to accelerate how long it takes to create high-fidelity immersive environments for any sort of, basically between today and the holodeck. That's kind of where we're trying to close that gap. And then the next is the use of virtual environments as training environments for next-generation AIs.
Hi, everyone. My name is Craig Yu, and I'm an associate professor of computer science at George Mason University. And I direct a research group called Design Computing Extended Reality, and applying AI for generating virtual content such as virtual environments, virtual characters is something we are working on, and I've been working on that for more than 10 years since my PhD thesis. Back in the old days, we apply AI optimization algorithms for generating virtual environments, so you can have a algorithm generating infinite amounts of bedrooms, factories, you name it, right? So you can apply those things for training, for gaming, for whatever purposes. Yeah.
All right. So, hello, my name is Connie Tang, otherwise known as Tianjin Online. I am primarily an illustrator and streamer on the internet. However, I have also delved in the world and stuff of augmented reality and have been developing an augmented reality visual novel in my spare time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you for joining us, okay? And let's start out by talking about what the hell does machine learning and AI mean to you? Because I know personally that 3 different people here do completely radically different things with machine learning and AI. You talked about creating content, so you could actually generate 3D images in a simple and easy manner, which is massively difficult right now, or at least to do it halfway well.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, it's quite a field that is exploding. I mean, with 2D is definitely on the tail end of things, and 3D is coming up really far. But like just like the image, the meshes it creates, there's so many polygons and stuff that they're starting to make AIs that get that ironed out. So it's really amazing.
Well, I think it's amazing when you start being able to just talk and say, give me something, and it creates it in front of you.
Yeah, that's right.
Sam?
It's from the video game industry, there's a whole ethical stuff with it, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But it's made, we've had to approach it as that, we're not trying to generate things and like generate art from these AI models, but we're using it to be able to create historical personalities. The whole thing was that we made a system to build a back-end personality system because there's things like, how do you quantify if somebody returns their shopping cart when they're done grocery shopping into a variable? That's something that is really important for figuring out the kind of person someone is. So we're able to do it with historical figures, and it's really nice with how we have machine learning technology now. You can feed it so much data, and you can build so much so quickly that I'll get into it more later, but we're doing Marie Curie, and it's really great that I can feed Marie Curie's research into this, and there's so much that she can then pull as part of her own personality.
So I guess in terms of what it means for us.
What do you think is for you?
Yeah, I'm not even going to begin to try to define it, I don't think, but I think when I look at the systems that we're working with, it's really looking at how systems can learn, and really it comes down to data. It comes down to finding ways to interact with, process, understand, analyze, data, things that can be self-learning, and then also, from the human side of it, I'm very interested in how it complements sort of the human-machine teaming aspect. So, how can these things complement our own intelligence?
Yep. I agree that. So we have a massive amount of data right now, right? Whether we have video data, 3D data, text data, sound data, whatever, right? So I see AI as a very important tool for us to make sense of the data and for us to extract useful patterns from the data so that we can apply that to generate content that is meaningful for the VR, AR users. One idea I have been thinking of is you mentioned like novel data and so on, right? So I always have this fantasy of and these days the NLP is advancing so fast, right? So in the novel data, you have lots of story content, right? You have lots of description about how people interact with the environment and how people interact with each other, right? So if you have the AI coming in, you can potentially apply the AI to extract such information such that you can visualize such thing using AR or VR techniques, right? Then that would be, revolutionizing how we create stories, how we create, meaningful interactions out of the data we already have, right?
Connie?
Just gonna get my thoughts together first. Okay, so the way that I see AI and ML so far.
Speak a little
is
closer
that,
to the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
So the way that I'm currently seeing AI and machine learning so far is that it is intended to be used currently as a jumping off point. However, there are some people, tech bros, who would rather see it used as like a final product, or as a way to like replace artists and people who make things out of their own hands and their own minds. And
I had a feeling you're going to be at that view.
yes, I have been an artist online for a while, so I've seen the results of some of those works. Programs like Midjourney and maybe like Stable Diffusion are currently being used in. I'm sorry. It's okay. I've seen some AI programs such as like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. I think there's some others out there like Dolly. They're being used in shows like Netflix. They're being used for like shows in like Netflix, Marvel, Disney. Even like industries are still using this as like, again, a final product. Yeah. So that's where, as someone else here said, the ethics come in.
Let's talk about different areas here, okay? Meta's made a lot of announcements about their AI models. Meta is going to be one of the first ones out there where they have in the VR world. Unfortunately, it's the metaverse for them. I don't think much of the Cartoon Network. But in there, you're going to be able to interact with not what is traditionally considered non-player characters, avatars, who they claim you will not be able to tell the difference between a human. Their voice will be better with better machine learning models. More importantly, their underlying knowledge of certain key areas will be based on machine learning algorithms. They use the example of a dozen different experts. You're going to be an expert on golf, so you can go and talk to a golf pro in the virtual world. And they're going to go beyond more and more in that. Do you think this is possible? Forget the ethical parts for a side. Do you think it's going to be more and more of that?
Yeah.
What's the impact?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Some other really I think scary examples of that too is that you're seeing some like things that were once seen as crimes of the future actually happening now. So, for example, machine learning being able to take I think like 15 seconds of someone's voice print and then being able to kind of perfectly like replicate things. We're seeing like scams now where people think they're talking to a loved one and they need money and like that. That's just over the phone now. Like it's really not. It's going to reach a whole nother level when it's an avatar representation of someone, which you can do with a scan of someone's face now. I mean, it's those sort of things are absolutely on the horizon and have all sorts of implications.
I'm sort of interesting that we went right to the dark side of what AI and machine learning, and didn't look at the positive aspects of it.
Oh, I don't think they can do it. I don't think Meta is capable of doing it yet. And there's a lot of really positive things that you can do, and I really like the idea of being able to talk to experts. Like that's a lot of you build a personality around someone, so you can have an accountant or a golfing expert. But the problem is that there are too many things in there that people are not checking. I don't know if anybody saw the like Chevy dealership in Texas that they literally just put ChatGPT as their AI help, and as soon as you ask it a question that you can break out of the Chevy dealership mentality, it'll start giving you like physics equations. Like it's one of those things that like I really love where they're going with it, and I really love the developments that they're making, but I think there's still some really massive hurdles that haven't been crossed yet to make it 100% viable.
Will people be okay with interacting with this? Assuming it's okay, is there any downsides from humans not being able to interact with the computer side?
I think it's just going to evolve over time. Over time, I think that's just going to evolve to be the new normal, similar to thinking about how many things happen now on automated phone trees. And I'm going to try not to keep going to the dark side on this stuff. I don't know. There's a lot of fundamental paradigms in sort of human interaction and that are going to shift. Both in terms of productivity and really affecting just about everything.
Yeah.
We had talked earlier about this at the other panel. Is that I think there's a lot of use in things that you can't currently do, and I think there's a lot of things that's where AI needs to focus on. Like we don't need an AI to make video game art. We have artists who can do that, but we need an AI to recreate the voice of, I don't know, Cary Grant to give you a guide through the Museum of Hollywood. like that's something that is, you can't get that any other way. But it's also, then you're still in a gray area for the AI, and it's
You're in
like
very gray area.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, cool, it's learning, but that's still somebody's loved one, and that's something that we have to go across when we're trying to do historical figures. Is I have to reach out to the family and be like, are you 100% okay with this? You need to give us the full support, and we've gotten a lot of no's. And it's I don't blame them. I don't judge them at all. It's a question of if your dead relative was a veteran in a war and there's a museum for that war and they want to have real life accounts and like, oh, can we speak to your grandfather about World War II? Some people would say, yeah, that's great. I think that's cool. And a lot of people would say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And I think it's just, we need to accept that as we're developing AI, is that some people are just not going to be okay with it.
How far back do we go before it becomes historical? I mean, Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, that's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say yes.
The for Rogue One, the family of Grand Moff Tarkin, what's it, Christopher? No.
I forget the actor's name.
Yeah, I forget the actor.
Peter Cushing.
Disney will not say whether or not they got rights from him or not. They were under an NDA with the family. They didn't want to talk about it because they don't want to set precedent that you have to contact the family. We started popping this out a few years ago for other movies where they started putting images of historical actors in the movie, and it's still a real gray area of law.
Let me throw
Let's
another.
take questions after a little bit later, okay?
Yeah, let me throw another more positive example. I think the fact that AI can understand human better and better can turn AI into a really good vehicle for realizing like VR-based educational tools, right? For example, you can have AI acting as a coach in virtual reality, right, to improve human performance, human skills, right? For example, you may have a VR scenario teaching people how to deal with some emergency situation or some medical situation, right? So the fact that you can track all the human actions in the VR and have AI analyze that data, understand the human performance, can drive more personalized adaptive training, right? That can more effectively improve human performance and skills. That may be one positive example we can think of.
The AI is very unlikely to produce new skills, but to give out the information when no one's available seems to be an alternative. We always use the example of Antarctica. Someone down in Antarctica needs advice, but he doesn't have the communications to back. So they use some AI to help him fix the plumbing. Examples have popped up repeatedly.
One of my favorite projects that I've gotten to work on so far. It never got released, unfortunately, but it was with the University of Oxford in England. This is early days, so this is before ChatGPT was a thing. So they're still trying to do early generative, voices. And they wanted to do Winston Churchill the night before the D-Day invasion. And what was really interesting was that because at the time you couldn't, if you asked an AI, said, hey, as Winston Churchill, what do you think's going to happen tomorrow when you land on France? He's going to say he wins and he beats Hitler and that he knows that they win World War II and everything's fine. But if you actually asked Winston Churchill the night before D-Day, he's probably terrified and has no idea if it's actually going to work. So that was a big thing where we got to work with it was all done using Winston Churchill's radio speeches. So it was all built that you were talking to Churchill, but it all sounded very period accurate, and it was really cool what you could do with it. And that's something that there is no way you could ever possibly recreate that without a virtual sense.
Half his speeches were done by a double. How the hell did you make the difference between the double and his voices?
Really early generative AI. I wish I had vocal samples because he sounds absolutely trashed in all of them.
Drunk.
It's so funny. It's like, oh, he sounds drunk in all of his voice recordings. Everybody's like, well, he kind of was.
One of the examples that pop up in using deep fake and AI, everyone's familiar with the toothpick law. It's a vague reference that you can't make something illegal if it's 100%. If there's a good use for it, you can't make it illegal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a big loophole. That's very heavily exploited by some people.
Exactly, and it dates back to all the way back for some laws we had back in the 20s about new technology. In this instance, one of the better examples of deep fake was to take Japanese films and redo them with modern English voices, so the lips are in sync.
Oh.
And that was a brilliant idea. That was a brilliant, good use of it, and it shows that there are legal, ethical uses for this. Let's talk about one of the different AIs. For some of you, content, if we're going to have millions of online worlds, is going to be difficult. You can't have someone have to be there to draw every tree if what you need is tons and tons of forest. AI and machine learning is going to help us generate more content.
More trees, more flowers, more, I don't know, even like patterns of grass would be nice to have.
I think that's one of the complicated things about trying to actually build a metaverse.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're trying to build a world that looks and behaves like the world, like you need doorknobs to work like doorknobs, windows to open and close, coffee machines to
What about fantasy
coffee.
worlds? We are seeing machine learning as a way to do movement, natural movement. We have machine learning algorithms that has a person walking much more realistically. We have ones that are being used to have someone, I have 5 feet and 1 wheel. How do I walk? And by teaching them over and over again, they actually look more realistic. Is this having an impact in animation? Or I've been seeing it. Have you seen this? Or is
Yeah, I've seen it like, I've seen where they can just take a original 2D image of a fish and turn that into a 3D model and have it animate as well. And it just blows my mind how they're able to do this. It's not super great now, but it's something that can be used right away.
one of the nice things about this is once you get it correctly done, having the fish animate around a rock or around through some kelp is easy, which for traditional animators, it is not easy.
And
Connie, let's hear yours.
sorry. And I have heard of line art being somewhat automated in one of the, I think it's Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah. Yeah, line art was being, there was like a video that I've seen that had like the process of creating line art like through AI instead of just having like the animator just go through it like one frame at a time.
I mean, I
Something
know
like
with.
that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I
Okay.
thought I interrupted you.
No, sorry, sorry.
Let's keep it moving here.
So,
Go ahead.
okay, sorry. So talking about the fish example, that's really amazing. One thing I have seen in research, actually that's my PhD advisor work some years ago, was that he applied AI, like neural networks, to train a artificial fish to navigate a virtual ocean, right? So you can have the neural networks control the muscles of the fish, right, based on the vision of the fish in the virtual world. So it's totally, it's trained from lots of simulations. So it's not even capturing how a real fish navigates. It's just trained based on the virtual simulations. So it's really
Okay,
amazing.
I've got to ask this to the artists in the group, Connie, and not just you and everything else. Is it unethical to do that as opposed to hiring artists to do it? Yeah, okay. Anyone in the audience?
If you don't mind, if you don't mind, add one comment. I think somehow it may not be feasible to create such animation manually,
Yes.
right? Because there are so many possibilities of how a fish may navigate an environment, and there are so many possibilities about the environment. There may be walks, there may be some other stuff.
Does anyone
Somehow you use an AI to generate a behavior. It's maybe the easiest way to do it somehow.
Can be easy.
Yeah.
Though the animator might want to like include their own like personal touches
Agreed.
and put their own style into that particular piece.
Yeah. I think part of the challenge is going to be that it may not even be a question of ethical as much as it's going to be driven by things like profit, decisions.
yes, but that's not ethical.
And I mean, you'll find like animators being we talk a lot about people not being replaced, but AI making people more productive. So a lot of the high cognitive load, like the time intensive, freeing up those things to let people do the more creative parts that they're better at. It's going to be interesting.
One of the areas that there has been a lot of research lately has been what's called digital twins or digital doubles or even digital clones, which is when you're not just doing an AI of a historical figure or a non-player character. We want an AI to be me so that when I'm not around, it can make my decisions or at least get the data for us. Now, up until real recently, this has been absolute sci-fi. It's no longer sci-fi.
So I mean, that's what got Ray Kurzweil started, right? Like, so if anybody's familiar with Ray Kurzweil, he's a genius inventor. He's invented all sorts of things over the years. Google, I think, recruited him to be one of their first heads of AI. And there's a great documentary with him where he talks about what inspired him. This is like 8-10 years ago, I think, where he talks about he has this vision of being able to take all of the artifacts that his father left behind and then turn that into a representation of his father that he can interact with. And so a lot of his work is really based on that idea of what happens when artificial intelligence, meets and exceeds the capabilities of the human brain. But that's apparently been his driving vision of bringing his father essentially back from the grave to be able to interact with them. I like the Superman 2 example a lot more. It's a little,
Yeah.
But I think what we're seeing now, though, when we think about how much data we create in our daily lives, how much content we create and put out on social, every email we send, all these little digital artifacts. And it's not hard to imagine a future state, in a generation or two, where those sort of like living representations of ourselves live on past us as a, I think that also becomes a question of like how do you opt out of that potentially?
I was working with after Maxis dissolved, a bunch of the developers from EA went on to go form their own studios with Will Wright, the guy who made The Sims, and they wanted to do digital proxies, where it was essentially you would be able to build these full personalities of living people. So it was an offshoot of like what we were doing. But the problem was you run into the same thing where it's pulling so much data because you can feed it all the information about you, but the AI will still check everything it has access to. So, I was talking to the Will Wright proxy, and I asked him what his favorite game to make, which was SimAnt. He said that in his master class, so I knew what I was asking, and he told me Railroad Tycoon. He never worked on Railroad Tycoon. He was never at all involved in Railroad Tycoon, and it's something where it's like I feel like it's really difficult to do something like that if you don't have the amount of data as like somebody really historically famous.
Yeah. Do you think that's a calibration problem though? Like, is that something that the technology will improve?
We hope it is.
I don't know if you could document all that. I mean, it's like I try to think of like the like figures that like I've worked on, and like Kay Kaiser was big band leader. He has songs in Fallout New Vegas and Mafia 2. He was really interesting because there was so much from him. There were movies and records and lots of stuff there. If you don't have that kind of documented history of somebody, it is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, even the voices, we get all of our AI voices from Laserdiscs. I don't know if anybody out here remembers Laserdisc or has Laserdisc player. Laserdisc is the future. It's not dead, I promise. The audio quality on those Laserdiscs is actually so incredible, and the filmmakers loved it. They loved Laserdisc, and so there are these really incredible film collections that only exist on Laserdisc, and the audio quality that you can get off of those is so high that that's how you can make the really believable historical voices. But if somebody's voice isn't on Laserdisc, it's really difficult for me to do something believable.
Let's go on to a different area of concern. One of the bigger issues with AI is what's called algorithm bias. AIs tend to like what is the most common. They're the ultimate Occam's razor, and so outliers are rejected almost immediately, and that's not human nature, and that's not good. I mean, for decision making, using AIs have proven to be the bad choice. Is this going to be solvable? Has an impact on VR and AR? I mean, if we're going to start having these avatars, it's like your example of, who's the example of the thing started talking about things outside the normal range. Sorry about that. You're right. Yeah,
They put us next to the jam space last year, too.
That was a thing.
We can talk louder. No.
So I can start on this one. One of the things that this idea of humans introducing bias into artificial intelligence models, and then also people being biased in turn, I think there's actually going to be some really interesting areas of research, and maybe, Craig, this is something, if I do go back to school, maybe you can help me with, because I'm very interested in the idea of like this causal loop between bias being interjected into artificial intelligence, and then that bias then feeding back into our own, like how will we even know when that's happening? I think there's still big wide open questions about how we'd even detect it first, and then how would we mitigate it?
Well, detecting is fairly easy. You know, look at the stats and look at the stats of a recommendation afterwards, and they should at least be close within a bell curve approximation. And we're not seeing that because AIs want to do things that's proven over and over again.
Yeah, when you create an AI model, you do a checkpoint. It's basically saving it to hard disk, so you can always go back to the way you trained the AI. So if there is any bias introduced that you don't want, you can always revert back.
Okay.
I think like these days you can tell an AI to not do something. So something like not to tell you the recipe to a napalm bomb or display certain behaviors. It's something that
A lot of these
mostly
algorithms, we don't
skim
know why they
through.
do things, so telling it not to do this is not that easy at times.
Yeah. I think this is something that ChatGPT is working on, as far as I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting. They were going to release, if I understand it correctly, they were going to release ChatGPT in 2020 originally, and
Yes.
they decided not to because they were worried about how it would influence the election at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of really how these things I guess actually anecdotally, just seeing some of these tools start to go into production and people using them for very specific tasks, it's a little scary how quickly people will trust the output from a tool like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
At its best, I think it's used to give us options to consider, to things to like as a sounding board, as a visualization tool, like stuff like that's really useful. But then we're seeing as adoption spreads, we're seeing people just kind of trust them almost blindly, which
We're
is
seeing it being used as like a final product, and that is
Yeah.
why sometimes I've been seeing like books,
Term papers being written.
term papers.
Yeah.
There's the case about 4 years ago of a
Graduate
lawyer
theses.
who turned in a brief that was written with it. He's lucky to still be practicing law because the AI created fake cases. And the judge found out about this, and man, was he blasted. The lawyers will not be using ChatGPT for quite some time due to that case. It was so bad.
Yeah, apparently that's frowned upon in the law
Yeah.
to make up cases, I guess.
Let's talk.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sorry,
And we'll
repeat
say
that,
we'll
please.
say it for the people in the back too.
Yeah, we're going to move over there. Let's continue one more question before we open up to the floor, okay? One of the more interesting uses of machine learning and AI is in the area of object recognition. And this has been unbelievably useful. Ray-Ban glasses are going to come out, so if we look at something and says, what am I looking at, it can identify it. We're starting talking about not using GPS, but instead using identification of your surroundings as knowing where you are for augmented reality. This is a great and interesting use. Do you think it's going to be a possibility, or is it not going to work?
I think it's going to be very hard once it starts to get to really unique objects. I think it's going to be really good at helping identify common things. And I mean, that's what people are going to use it for the most part. I mean, I can imagine Amazon having something where when you look at something in Whole Foods, it tells you everything about it, something like that. But what if you're trying to identify whatever minerals are in a rock? Like, I want AI to be able to do that, but I don't know if it's going to be able to get that intricate with what it struggles with now. I mean, we were talking about how Connie said that you can see, people are using AI art as finalized art, and you can tell. You can always tell. Like the hands, the fingers are screwed up. The eyes are really difficult to do. The Fallout show got in trouble for it because they have a car that's back to front.
Backgrounds.
And it's like, I don't know how people don't catch that, and it's a shame because it works well as a tool, but you can't just funnel out AI art as a finished product because it's not perfect.
I think it's going to be very use case driven too. Like I don't think it's going to be sort of a general intelligence where it could, like, if I were looking over the room here, I could identify every single object. But one example I just saw out at the CES show in Vegas a couple weeks ago, there's a company that's just devoted to being able to use vision processing to make nutritional estimates about the food on your plate. Like so something where and I don't know, I've been using a food tracking app lately to kind of like really keep track of everything. Hugely tedious. I would love it if I could just kind of look down and it like instantly goes into like my food.
Dieters
diary, right?
everywhere.
Yeah, like so. But I think those sort of like very specific uses will fill out probably, over time.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Google Gemini's demo of, they basically have somebody drawing a duck and it's like looking at it from top down, and the AI can see it's a duck swimming. The guy colors it blue, and he's like, ducks aren't normally blue. And it's a great multimodal type of large language model that it's got going on.
Yeah, I think that's one, like it works a little bit like the way the human brain works, right? Like you when we look at something cognitively, we start to break it down. We're like, okay, that's got a head and 4 legs and a tail, and maybe that's a dog, maybe that's a cow. Like as we start to fill in more details, then because with the Gemini one, it's really interesting to see how they the more details come in, the closer it gets to being able to understand what it is.
I think at this point we're going to open up to questions, and I'm sorry if I chopped you off before that. So your hand over there popped up first.
Yep. Yeah.
Now that's real interesting because a lot of that's a test case that's been talked about a lot about the bias with the mortgage industry. Is the final decision making a person or an AI? As long as there's a person, then
Yeah.
it's
But I think to address the point of people being replaced, so it's interesting. This is a major theme of a lot of generative AI conferences right now, and it's something that historically we see this in every major shift in technology, right? Like from the industrial age. I mean, we're going back to the dawn of time, right? The thing that jobs do get displaced. You are able to do more with fewer actual people, but over time, other jobs come in, and like one thing that humans are I think are really good at is finding new ways to be useful and to find value. So I do think that as people get more productive, I think it's not even a question of if it's going to happen, and I don't mean to be all doom and gloom, but I do think it's going to be a question of what will happen next to, if jobs are consolidated or replaced, what will then rise to fill some of those voids? What will happen next?
gentleman here.
Hey, so I guess my question is about using AI to help with this, or even replace humans for decision making, because I think in a lot of cases we have seen AI perform better than humans in many sort of simpler tasks for like recognition or even progression, simple classification problems. How much better do you think AI needs to perform over humans for a general population to trust a decision?
Okay.
Anybody want to take
I'll give you two. Let me answer this one, okay? Let me give you 2 different examples. You use AI to sort through 10,000 pictures trying to find one bad guy, okay? that is a good excuse, much better than people trying to get it works. Once we look at the picture, yeah, that's him. Then we have another example of here's an AI looking at several pictures and trying to say, is this person whatever it is, and making the decision solely basis. Okay, in that instance, it's trying to make a decision on one person based on whatever criteria. So using it as a tool to go through massive amount of data and then person looks at it and makes a further decision is one thing. Using it to make precise decision on a few people, that has been proving to be not a good idea. Does that make sense to some people?
The potential implications of that decision are also like what the potential consequences are is a huge factor in how what that threshold is. There's going to be a lot of regulatory and like if you look at the DoD right now, they're actually doing some really interesting work around that idea of like how much do you trust to AI and how much do you trust to the human and how should that work?
We got a lot of hands here. I'm sorry, I'm just randomly going to pick at someone. You're next.
Sure. So a little bit before, you all were talking about biases in AI and how, as an organization, you spoke about how companies or organizations can have backlogs of things people would like back. How are we going to be able to help make sure that the biases don't continue to be brought in, so we don't have colorism or economic disparities in AI models? And how are we going to help, as technologists, us be able to make sure everyone's controlling that instead of
People, oh, I'm sorry.
It's like, go ahead.
People really need to like look through it. Like that's what it comes down to. I mean, when I say that we're like building these AI personalities, someone still has to sit there and go through and build this the first time to make sure it's done properly. And that's a huge issue, is that people have built these massive language learning models, but then they haven't gone through and checked anything. And it's funny because I was reading a study the other day that there's a huge issue with where it's trying to predict like crimes, and it's focusing on minority areas because of the of systemic racism throughout history, and so it's taking the historical data and then using that as its own bias. And
Algorithm bias again.
Yeah,
That's exactly what it's.
But if somebody went through it and checked through and like there was a human eye to it, you'd get a much better, much more useful program. But that requires time and money.
Craig, do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a quick note. I think ensuring the transparency of the decision-making process is important. So there is some researchers working on explainable AI. So it's not just about take AI as a black box. You throw AI the question and then just get an answer and then use it, right? So you also want the AI to generate the decision-making process, like how it comes down to that answer, right? And so the humans can look at the process and understand why it comes to this conclusion, right? And being able to judge from there. Yeah.
I'm going to do with the blue shirt right there first. Yeah,
Whoops.
you. In the mask, blue. Yes.
So kind of
I'm going to get a rubber ball and throw it out there.
on a more lighthearted topic, going back to like,
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
trying to bring some sunshine. Like AI in particular has been really like for like D&D nerds. Like there's been a lot of like AIs that have been doing like solo adventures.
Yeah.
But my interest with that in VR is like how soon do you think we'll have like especially I think you said you work in the studio game design. Do you think we're anywhere close to being like, hey, me and my friends want to get in VR and play D&D and like have an actual like some kind of adventure? Do you think we're anywhere close to that? Do you think that's feasible soon?
If any of you have any connection to Meta, Steve, you can steal my idea and you can tell us to them, because I will tell you exactly
They
how
fired
you can.
me. I'm not going to go back to them.
Well, good. Well, yeah. Don't worry. Give this to somebody else. Give it to somebody else, because this is how
Me
you
and
make.
11,000 other people on Thursday and
This is how you
November.
make the metaverse work. You work with Roll20 and you build a VR tavern. You get a tavern to have friends come in. You can sit at tables and you build AI NPCs around that. You get people to come in, build the ecosystem, and be there. So yes, you can do that, and that's a really great idea. And I think that you've seen some of the AI tools that they have for like different characters, and unfortunately, Meta's Llama 2, their language model, it's really good for being able to set in your own like personality parameters. Like there's been a lot of people making like figures from Warhammer to be AI characters, is really cool. So yes, I think it's a really good idea, and it just have to have the money and the resources put into
coming,
making it.
I think. Yeah.
For an AI character.
Yeah. But
The
but
money,
co-
the resources,
co-signed,
the
though,
entire
100%.
database of games.
You go next, right here.
A lot of the conversation has been pretty future tense.
Yeah.
A lot is very present tense. So right now, actually,
That wasn't intentional. We just kind of went that way.
Yeah.
what's interesting about AI to you right now?
You stole my last question, but yeah.
I made an architecture program that predicts how occupants will use a space. And that's really interesting because you can put in any kind of factors like HVAC values, lighting values, all kinds of things like that, and then you can predict how people would use a space. So I did like an office building in Melbourne, Australia. So we would take the average weather of the season and then take that as the comfortable temperatures for what people would want and what they would expect from inside of a space. And then we were able to simulate that. It's very basic. It's like a bunch of circles moving through a 3D building, but that's like the level of trust that I have with it is I can do predictive data simulation, but I don't know if I would trust it to finalize my mortgage.
Personally, one of the things that's been really interesting, I've been using it some different tools, as I've been calling it like an ADHD co-pilot. Like a lot of things that I would say have sometimes been challenging for me in the past, like just kind of managing my incredibly short attention span and interest in all the things. Using these tools as sort of a collaborative partner has just been a game changer. And I feel like that's just sort of through individual exploration, but it makes me really wonder, what is that going to mean, not to get all future tense again, but
I
Connie,
do
what do you
know
use it for?
somebody who
Yeah.
used, back when Discord had its AI bot, I think its name is Clyde.
Yes.
At some point, yeah, before it shut down. RIP. There was someone I knew who had it like help him with his code, and then eventually it spoke like a cowboy and has never turned itself back ever since. Yeah.
Lady.
So I'm writing this down just so I don't fall it. So I would actually love to learn a little more about how, in research, talking to users and talking to people, and how that's informed your decision making when it comes to AI. I work in user research, and I work specifically with focus groups. So, and we do a lot of like studies in AI, but we're very specific in accessibility. So I'd love to know, like in other spaces.
Now you're talking about people's perception of AI.
Perception and
Acceptance.
Yeah, perception, what they would like from it, their fears around it.
We had the exact same conversation session earlier today in the area of education with VR. So what about for AI and VR? What's studies?
now there's a lot of excitement about it. So when we go to, so I do UX research on the initial side of this, and I think we were talking about design research as a, it's just a human-centered component of this. There's a lot of excitement about it. There's a lot of fear of being replaced. There's a lot of it's especially now it's a new hotness buzzword. On the UX side of things, there's also a really almost disturbing trend, I think, of people wondering, well, will we be able to create synthetic users? Like as you've probably experienced, right? Like getting access to users can sometimes be the hardest part of the process. So there's a lot of people who are really kind of like, well, what if we create a simulation of these users based on a company's emails or a company's job postings or something like that? And we're just kind of like, no, like you want to jump in front of that, but it's a little, there's a lot of, a lot of questions still to answer there. Is anybody else here from a research standpoint? How do you go about reaching out to people to learn how they want to use these tools or what their concerns are?
So, for example, we have been working on projects using virtual reality for personalized training, right? So the way it works is that you let people try the tasks in virtual reality, right? And you track the behaviors, you ask people about the feedback, and you ask them about the understanding of the knowledge and so on, right? And so AI comes in a sense to adapt the training experience, right, with respect to the user response. I think that's how the user's feedback and the user's data may come in to influence the experience eventually. Yeah. From the if I'm talking about it like VR personalized training or educational experience. Yeah.
Okay, actually, we've asked you. Lady right there with the mask, right there.
Yeah. I work as a software developer, and everybody I know keeps on poking fun at me about AI eventually taking my job. However, my argument to them is that it's going to produce some glitchy-ass code, especially for legacy applications.
Yes.
Is there a question in there?
Yes.
I agree.
Do humans not, though?
We have some bad code out there already with humans
yeah.
writing it. We don't need AI to help us with that bad code.
Really quick. I was going to say, like, you know, ChatGPT is really good at coding, and so if you ask ChatGPT, hey, write this piece of code for me, it'll do it. But then you had a bad way of saying it. You know, you have to say, write it to this API spec at this version, and then that'll give you a better code. So it's kind of like your way of interacting with the AI may be bad too.
There's been some discussion from Apple that we're going to be seeing the AI in the very near future being able to set up the framework. And this is true, and not just Apple, but everyone in general. To set up a framework for an app is a lot of boilerplate.
Yeah.
And for it to generate the boilerplate specific to your needs to begin with, and to use human language to describe what you need, because we don't describe things very well, logical at all, okay? That's my most important giveaway from machine learning is voice input.
So, I mean,
then at that point, you program it. So that's a huge tool.
And I think like any skilled trade, you know, like there are a lot of things like they're finding in medicine, like, you know, the ability to make accurate diagnoses,
No.
you know, these, you know, the machine model may not get tired. It may not be, you know, their judgment may not be impaired from having a bad day or a couple too many drinks, but the machine model also isn't going to be able to do that sort of like edge case inference too, to know that based on their experience and their skill, that something that, you know, applying some technique or having some sort of insight to a special case scenario, you know, maybe over time that changes, but that human aspect of it is going to be very, very difficult to replace.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Specifically, maybe this is more of a legal issue, but even though I work as a software developer, it's my hopes to become public. And the idea of ChatGPT or those models being trained off of stuff that specifically is not in the public domain and hasn't been volunteered by the artist for this model makes my blood boil. And some of these companies that create AI programs have been caught by a leaked document, but having lists of artists that they are supposed to be trained off of.
Yep.
No.
We can't do anything.
I'm sorry. Right now, training on someone's art is not against the law. You might find it offensive, but there is no laws because that's a transformation. This is an area I actually have some expertise in.
I
That's
believe
a
that is still a
transformation.
case. Like, I believe
It hasn't been
that-
settled yet.
Not settled yet, but
Yeah.
it's
I
getting
think,
there.
I think OpenAI though, didn't they just roll out something that would allow people or would enable people to opt out of having their work? So they're trying to, but I think this is sort of, yeah.
Adobe Nightshade.
Yeah, so there's a consortium too. It's like Adobe and a couple other places that are looking at that content authentication to be able to kind of see if a work has been changed or
And
altered. A lot of the technology is moving a lot faster than the ability to regulate or
Right.
or the guidance even needed to establish
And the
it.
laws that we have right now err on the side of saying if you look at someone's style and try to duplicate the style, that's not against the law.
And I'd say too, it's also if you think about it globally, there's a lot of players in this space
Yes.
that could care less about our approach to ethics or intellectual property. Like some of the stuff, Pandora's box is like already open.
I know that DeviantArt does have the ability to opt out of having your artwork being trained as an AI model, but I would rather have an opt-in system rather than put the responsibility to opt out into my own hands.
There is another
Like-
I'm sorry.
There's probably like hundreds of millions of users out there who didn't really know that their artwork is being used in the first place, or haven't touched their account in years.
If it's any positive note, Steam just said that you have to identify if there is any AI used in your game, and if you don't, people can report it. So I'm really hoping, buy your games from Valve. At the moment, Valve is being really good about it, and like it's not just artwork. You have to disclose if it's used for music, writing,
Storylines.
anything. You have to disclose it. So I think that might. I'm hoping that maybe that's going to bring some regulation here because there's such a major player. But that's like the one positive thing with it is at least Steam's trying to curb it.
Dialogue
So
for games as well as stories is also being asked to identify who the author is.
I will say this does make me miss the early days of the web, like when the web first came out in 19, like the mid 90s, and you were thrilled to have some place that you could publish and share and people would find your work, right? Like there was this sort of general communal spirit of just like openness and sharing. I mean, this is before I guess it all got very profit driven, and maybe I'm still like too idealistic on that. But how does this change? Like search engines have been scraping this data for decades now. So what is it about AI particularly that is it fuel on the fire?
Which is interesting because most scraping has been found to be legal in most instances if you're getting the raw data and not
So you're
not the
you're
representation.
you're storing the data, but you're not actually using it to produce something
It all has
new.
to do with alteration of the data.
Okay.
Transformation is the word they use in the legal term, I believe.
It's called like
The lady here, you
transformative
raised your hand
space, right?
earlier in the day, and
I have 3 questions by now.
what's that? Give me one.
I have 3 questions. Sure, I'll try to wrap it all up into one. So first of all, I'm an electrical engineer. I work for the DoD.
Surprise.
AI for, I particularly work in flight controls, so flight critical, everything from stick to the ailerons that keep the pilot safe, that don't kill our warfighters. Obviously, AI is not being welcomed with open arms in the defense industry. I even had an ex who was a hacker, and when he was looking at AI hacking, like how can this protect our nation, he did not trust AI because, for example, like making up moves in a chess game, as we were talking about earlier, AI sometimes tries to make its own rules as a child. And being the mother of a 4-year-old, I see how that works. And sometimes AI feels like an all-knowing, all-powerful sort of a digital entity that is just actually a toddler. Like this, it's such a new technology. How do you teach a toddler ethics when it's just learning how to have fun at first? So, so what I wanted to get into, my first question is, just like, are you familiar with, who's the guy that wrote I, Robot?
Isaac
Asimov.
Asimov.
Yeah.
Asimov?
Asimov.
Robotics, is there going to be laws of AI that help, ethically
There's
this so that we can,
so the
is that coming into
check out the DoD's. Actually, they have ethical guidelines for the application of AI that, and I think they have like, an actual chief like artificial intelligence officer now who's like really tasked with helping. The challenge though is who's going to enforce them, and again, and from a DoD perspective, like when there's other forces in the world that do not play by those rules, right? How do you? I also worry a little bit that there's a tendency to humanize AI too much.
Yes.
That we tend to recreate it in our image a little bit, and I wonder kind of how much that might.
I read an article that compared AI to more of an elder god that has a big mask in the front, but has all of these powerful abilities in the back that is not human. And so to humanize it, to anthropomorphize it, is actually a little dangerous for that very reason. So my last question is consilience. Are you familiar with the concept of consilience? It's the wisdom, unity of different subjects that come together to make a solution. For example, politics and science have to work together to come out with a solution for global warming, say.
We usually call that synergy.
They need to shake hands with, yes, this data is meaningful, what do we need to do about it? Let's create a solution, right? So earlier,
We are supposed to be talking about VR and AR. That's going to be a little bit too big of a model. So
Well,
let's.
so the VR. So I'll say one thing, then I'll drop out. But
we're talking
So-
about it, and
so s-
everyone is. So
Steve, to tie this back into VR for you,
Please.
then I'll drop out.
Please.
But essentially, so the way AI is being used to really throw a lot of computing power at sort of modeling and simulation of all sorts of things, from medicine to biological processes to climate to, I mean, you name it. It's able to process things much faster. NVIDIA's CEO actually has a really interesting way of talking about this. That at NVIDIA they actually look at virtual reality not as like heads and headsets necessarily, but as in virtual environments in which artificial intelligence will be able to learn much faster than humans are able to. This is where a lot of the big breakthroughs are expected to happen. Then they look at sort of AR and VR and XR and spatial and whatever we're going to call it tomorrow. They look at that as the interface by which people will interact with these next generation AIs. So like, and not necessarily in a headset. It could be through our glasses, through our AirPods, through our, whatever we happen to be in at any given time. But
there are serious experiments about being able to read people's faces using machine learning and being able to of expressions and lie detectors and other types. And there's privacy issues with this. So this is a massive muck. We are at 5 o'clock now. We will be outside talking, and we'll be happy to keep talking. I don't know if we're going to have another discussion. If not, guys, one by one, just go through. What do you want to use machine learning for? What you cannot do right now? What do you want to do it in the future? I want better language models for in VR to be able to tell to do things.
thank you.
Thank you.